Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are wrestling with some of history's most enduring challenges. We've got four distinct mysteries that didn't just generate headlines, they went so much deeper.
Oh, absolutely. These are cases that burrowed right into our collective psyche.
We're talking about events that fundamentally changed how society views itself. They altered laws, redefined our understanding of psychology, and in at least one case, just completely shattered a nation's sense of innocence.
That's right.
Our mission in this deep dive is, I think, really crucial. We're not just here to recount the facts. We've got a dense stack of sources journals, police reports, historical accounts spanning continents and decades.
And we're going to try and extract the surprising lasting knowledge from them, the specific ways these stories, whether totally true or not, reshape the world.
Yeah, we're really examining the weight of mysteries. Why do we as people need definitive closure so badly? And what happens when the facts just completely collide with the stories we feel we have to believe?
Exactly.
Hmm.
I mean, these cases are famous not just for the victims or the criminals, but for what they reveal about us,
Mm-hmm.
about human nature, our societal flaws, and the limits of what justice can actually do.
So let's begin with a case that became the absolute blueprint for one of modern psychology's most famous concepts. A concept that, maybe ironically, was built on a very shaky foundation.
Hmm. We're starting in Kew Gardens, Queens, New York, 1964, the murder of Kitty Genovese.
Okay, let's unpack this one because it really is a defining moment. First, just setting the scene. Kitty Genovese, she was 28 years old, a smart, hardworking woman managing a bar called Ev's 11th Hour Sports Bar.
Right, and it's the early morning hours of Friday, March 13th, 1964. She's just finished her shift.
She pulls her red Fiat into the parking lot near her apartment building. She's barely 100 yards from her own door, from safety.
And this backdrop is so critical because the shock of this murder wasn't just the brutality of it, but where it happened. Kew Gardens was seen as this, quiet, safe, middle-class neighborhood.
The kind of place where this sort of random violence just didn't happen.
Exactly. The idea of this violation, it struck right at the core of urban security.
And the attacker, Winston Moseley, he was equally shocking in his banality.
Right. He wasn't some known street criminal. He was a 29-year-old business machine operator.
Sure.
Married, 2 children. He'd specifically driven out that night just looking for someone, a victim.
It's that complete randomness that just amplified the public terror.
Our sources detail this terrifying chronology, which we have to understand was not just one single event. It was a series of distinct actions separated by time.
What's become known as the triple assault.
Precisely.
So the first attack, it happens at 3:15 a.m. Kitty gets out of her car, and Moseley just emerges from the shadows with a knife. Her reaction, the sources say, was immediate and loud.
She screamed, "Oh my God, he stabbed me, help me."
And critically, this first scream, it actually worked.
It did. The noise, the sudden violence, it startled the residents in the apartments all around. Lights flickered on, windows opened.
And a man who was later identified as Carl Ross, he actually shouted from his 7th floor window, "Leave that girl alone!"
And that brief intervention, it did its job. Moseley retreated, he was momentarily scared off, and he just disappeared into the darkness.
So she's wounded, but she's conscious, and the attacker is gone. But what comes next is this crucial, tragic 10-minute gap that changes everything.
Kitty, bleeding and obviously in shock, is stumbling towards the back entrance of her building, just trying to get to safety.
And meanwhile, the lights in the windows that had responded to her cry, they go dark again.
The witnesses, maybe thinking it was a drunken brawl or a domestic dispute, were satisfied that the commotion was over. They closed their windows, went back to sleep.
And that retreat proved fatal.
Absolutely. Moseley came back after waiting about 10 minutes, confident that the immediate threat was gone.
He finds her barely conscious in a dimly lit hallway at the back of the building. This is attack 2, the fatal one.
He stabbed her repeatedly, sexually assaulted her, and then fled, having stolen just $49. She died right there on the floor of the hallway.
And on top of the witness's failure to act, the police response added another layer of failure.
It did. The sources note the police received the first official call at 3:50 a.m.
That's nearly 35 minutes after her first scream, and well after the final attack.
Kitty Genovese died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital.
The crime itself was just horrifying, but it was a story that followed 2 weeks later that didn't just grip the nation. It fundamentally defined American urban fear for decades.
Oh, completely.
That front-page New York Times story, the unforgettable headline, 37 who saw murder didn't call the police.
It was an instant defining narrative of total moral collapse.
The core allegation was that 38 law-abiding citizens, the number 38, included the man who shouted from the window, watched or listened to this entire attack for over half an hour.
And not one of them picked up the phone during the assault. The sources quote one witness who supposedly said they didn't want to get involved.
And that one quote, that single phrase,
Yeah.
it became a lightning rod.
It just exploded. It was held up as the ultimate symbol of urban alienation. The idea that city life had made people cold, selfish, morally bankrupt.
This is the profound aha moment that goes way beyond this one case. This idea, this phenomenon, it entered the academic world almost instantly.
They called it the Genovese syndrome, or more famously, the bystander effect. And it inspired a whole field of research in social psychology that continues to this day.
But wait, if the foundation of the story was so shaky, why did everyone, the media, the academics, cling to this myth for so long?
Because it offered a clean, simple explanation for a terrifying question. Why do good people sometimes do nothing?
Right.
And social psychologists John Darley and Bibla Tanay were directly inspired by that news story to conduct their groundbreaking experiments on what they called the diffusion of responsibility.
Let's just elaborate on that because it's so key to the legacy here. They hypothesized that when lots of people are present, the burden to act gets spread out.
They ran the now famous seizure experiment.
Yeah. They had students in a discussion group over an intercom. One of the participants was an actor who faked having an epileptic seizure.
And when the subjects believed they were the only person listening, 85% of them immediately went to get help.
But when they thought 5 other students were also on the line,
Only 31% responded. The presence of others just diffused the responsibility. It proved that inaction often comes not from cruelty, but from a psychological assumption that, well, someone else must have already called.
So the Genovese murder became this incredibly powerful, tragic parable taught in every Psych 101 class, a definitive, if factually flawed, example of societal failure.
The principle was proven by the experiment, but the original story, the Genovese story, was already a myth.
And here's the crucial turn. The foundational story that birthed this whole field of study was, according to decades of later research, largely inaccurate or even fabricated.
Right. The narrative of 38 silent witnesses was just wrong.
Subsequent investigations found so much contradicting evidence. I mean, for starters, the attack wasn't continuous. The fatal assault happened in an enclosed hallway at the back of the building.
So most of the witnesses who heard the first screams simply couldn't have seen the second fatal attack.
And for those who did hear the screams, many just heard fragments. And, in 1964 Queens, the sound of a woman screaming was tragically often just dismissed as a lover's quarrel.
A domestic dispute, sadly a common sound in apartment life. They weren't seeing a clear, protracted murder in real time.
And the main allegation that no one called the police, that was definitively false.
Completely false. The sources confirm at least 2 people called. One call, from Carl Ross, the man who shouted, was discounted because he called his father first. But another neighbor, a woman named Sophia Farrar, she rushed down to the scene.
Right, and she called the police from a phone booth just before that official 3:50 a.m. log. This fact, found years later in re-examined records, just proves the headline was pure sensationalism.
And that iconic number 38, it's highly suspect. The consensus now is that the number may have been deliberately inflated by the police themselves.
Why? To deflect criticism for their own slow response time.
Exactly. And the New York Times, hungry for a huge story about moral decay, just ran with it without fully checking the facts.
And what was completely lost in that rush to condemn the whole city was a genuine act of compassion.
Right. Kitty's friend, Sophia Farrar, the one who called the police, she held Kitty as she died, trying to comfort her in her final moments.
A clear beacon of human decency and direct action, and it was just erased from the public memory by the more powerful story of apathy.
So the real relevance of the Genovese case today isn't the crime itself, it's the power of narrative over fact. It shows how a compelling, dramatic, but false story can take on a life of its own.
And shape decades of social science and permanently alter public consciousness. The real mystery isn't why those people hesitated, it's how easily the myth of indifference replaced a much more complex reality. Before we move on, we have to talk about Moseley himself, because his actions later just added another layer of horror to this.
Right. Winston Moseley was captured just 6 days later while committing a burglary nearby.
And he confessed to way more than the Genovese murder. He admitted to 3 murders and multiple rapes, showing this chilling clinical detachment.
His trial brought relief, but Definitely not closure to the larger societal questions.
He was sentenced to death, but then New York abolished capital punishment for a time, so his sentence was commuted to life, but that wasn't the end of it.
No. He made several escape attempts, including a terrifying 5-day spree in 1968 where he took hostages and raped a woman.
He served an extraordinary 52 years in prison. He finally died there in 2016.
So the criminal is neutralized, but the psychological wounds caused by the story of the crime, that idea that your neighbor won't help you, that was already set in stone.
All right, now we pivot from a powerful, if flawed, social myth to a true event where the facts were just obscured by the intense gravity of fame and political power. It ensures the mystery will never truly die: the death of Marilyn Monroe.
This case is the perfect illustration of how celebrity and state secrecy can make definitive truth completely impossible.
So, August 4th, 1962, Los Angeles. Marilyn Monroe is only 36 years old. She's at the absolute peak of her fame, but her personal life is in total crisis.
The sources detail her struggles. She'd been fired from her last film. She was struggling with deep depression, insomnia, and a severe addiction to prescription meds.
And overshadowing everything were those complicated, high-stakes relationships, most famously the rumored affairs with President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy.
Let's reconstruct those final hours. On that Saturday, she had a therapy session with her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson.
Around 8 p.m., she goes into her locked bedroom, takes the phone with her. Her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, is staying overnight.
Then around midnight, Murray notices the light is still on under the door and senses something is wrong.
But crucially, she doesn't call the police. She calls Dr. Greenson. And this is where the timeline starts to get really murky.
It is. Greenson finally arrives at the house around 3:30 a.m. He can't get a response, so he breaks the window, gets in, and finds Monroe dead.
And this is the most critical detail that fuels all the speculation. The police weren't called until 4:25 a.m.
That delay, hours between the supposed midnight discovery and the official police call, that's central. It provided a window, literally and figuratively, for the scene to be managed or staged before any objective investigation could begin.
Right.
Now, the initial findings were technically sound. The LA County Coroner's Office ruled the cause of death as acute barbiturate poisoning.
A lethal combination of chloral hydrate and Nimbutal.
Right. And given her history of suicide attempts, the official manner of death was ruled probable suicide. The toxicology reports confirmed massive amounts of these drugs in her system, enough to kill several people.
But the moment that official file closed, the questions just started opening up, making sure this case would never really settle.
Let's start with that timeline. It's a complete mess, driven entirely by the witnesses. Mrs. Murray, the housekeeper, was questioned repeatedly and kept changing her story.
She initially suggested she found Monroe much earlier, around midnight, but then settled on the 3:30 a.m. story.
Those hours between midnight and 3:30, and then the delay until the police arrived. It's never been logically explained. What were Murray and Greenson doing?
Were they trying to revive her? Were they just in shock? Or were they busy removing evidence?
Then you have the major medical contradiction. The toxicology showed massive levels of barbiturates in her blood, but the autopsy found her stomach was nearly empty.
With no pill residue. How does a body absorb a lethal oral dose without any physical evidence in the digestive tract?
This is the crux of the forensic challenge. Medical experts looking at this suggested that if the blood concentration is lethal but the stomach is empty, the drugs may have been administered non-orally.
Which leads directly to the hypothesis that the drugs could have been given by injection, or maybe even an enema.
And that immediately suggests external involvement.
And the physical setting just adds to the suspicion. The locked door, it was locked from the inside, yet she was found lying face down on the bed, clutching the phone.
Would someone in a drug stupor consciously lock the door and then assume that specific position? It just seems unlikely.
It suggests either staging or that someone locked the door after they left.
And this brings us to the missing evidence. She died clutching the telephone, yet the phone records for that critical night just vanished.
Seized by authorities shortly after her death and, according to our sources, never returned or made public.
Who was she talking to in her final moments? The fact that the records disappeared just adds immense weight to the suspicion, implying they contain something too sensitive for public consumption.
We also can't ignore the physical evidence from the autopsy, which official reports often downplayed. Bruising on her body, specifically her hip and lower back.
Right. While they could be explained by a fall, they do raise questions about a potential struggle or some kind of external force.
The key here is the accumulation of all these inconsistencies. The timeline, the phone, the bruising, the stomach contents, they all point away from a simple, clean suicide.
And when you have that level of forensic ambiguity, combined with the most intense political and celebrity intersection of the era, well, conspiracy theories aren't just born, they are weaponized.
The Kennedy connection is, of course, the most enduring one. The theory is that the affairs with both John and Robert Kennedy had reached a breaking point. Monroe was unstable, threatening to go public.
Theorists suggest Robert Kennedy visited her that day, maybe to end it and retrieve sensitive documents, and that she was killed either accidentally in a struggle or deliberately to silence her.
The lethal power surrounding the Kennedy orbit meant the motive was huge.
Then you have the intelligence angle. Declassified FBI documents show she was under heavy surveillance because of her political associations. Her husband, Arthur Miller, her friend, Frank Sinatra.
J. Edgar Hoover, who had a complicated relationship with the Kennedys, certainly saw her as a security risk, especially if she was that close to the president.
And there's the mob theory. Through Sinatra, Monroe had ties to organized crime who were being ruthlessly pursued by Robert Kennedy.
So some theories suggest the mob may have killed her to frame the Kennedys to weaken the administration's crackdown.
The sheer number of powerful interests that wanted her silenced, protected, or exploited is just staggering.
But if we step back and we look for the most logical answer that doesn't involve, CIA assassins, we often land on the tragic human truth.
Right. Marilyn Monroe was a deeply troubled woman, addicted to medication, desperately searching for stability and feeling abandoned by the very powerful men who had courted her.
Her diaries show a woman in tremendous pain and desperation. The simplest criminal psychology suggests she took too many pills in a cry for help that went wrong, or a genuine suicide attempt.
Yes, but even if you accept that, it still doesn't explain the forensic gaps. The missing phone records, the lack of pill residue.
Which reminds us that the inconsistencies might just reflect the chaos of the night. Greenson and Murray rushing to stage the scene or tamper with evidence to protect themselves from scandal and professional ruin.
They were trying to clean up a mess, not necessarily commit a murder.
This case is the perfect illustration of how justice fails when fame and secrecy intersect. The missing evidence guarantees Monroe's death will remain Hollywood's most enduring mystery.
We may never know the truth, because the opportunity to find that truth was destroyed in the hours between her collapse and when the police finally arrived.
All right, let's do a complete pivot now. We're moving from the corrosive power of fame to the sheer audacity and ultimate failure of human ambition. We're going to Fortaleza, Brazil, August 2005, for the great robbery at Banco Central.
This is a story of incredible technical precision, meeting immediate human weakness.
The scale of this heist is what sets it apart. The target was the Banco Central do Brazil. They stole 164.8 million Brazilian reais,
which was about $70 million USD at the time, one of the largest bank heists in history. And it was achieved not with violence or hacking, but by meticulous brute force engineering that took months.
The planning started so subtly in early 2005. The cover was brilliant because it was so mundane. The gang set up a legitimate-looking business called Grama Sintética, artificial grass,
3 blocks from the bank. The location was specifically chosen for its proximity and its ability to act as a plausible cover for constant activity.
They occasionally sold some grass to keep up appearances, but the real work was happening under the floorboards.
Digging a massive serpentine tunnel. The dimensions are just staggering.
They dug a 78-meter tunnel that's 256 feet stretching under streets and sewers, aimed directly at the reinforced concrete floor of the bank vault.
For 3 months, the crew worked around the clock in shifts.
And the level of engineering was breathtaking. They excavated 4,000 cubic meters of earth. That's like over 200 large dump trucks of dirt.
They reinforced the tunnel walls, they installed lighting, they engineered ventilation systems to keep the workers alive down there.
And the disposal method was arguably the most meticulous part of the whole thing. They moved the dirt discreetly at night, using the landscaping cover to explain the constant transport of soil.
One slight miscalculation, and they would emerge in a sewer pipe or collapse the street. It was a masterpiece of criminal logistics.
So they chose their timing with surgical precision. A 72-hour window over a Brazilian public holiday weekend guarantees the bank is deserted until Monday morning.
On Friday night, the team entered the tunnel. The genius of the method was attacking the system's weakest point. They breached the vault floor from below.
Because all standard bank security is designed to guard against entry from above or through the walls. The floor is the path of least resistance.
Right. Once inside, they didn't just take everything. The vault had billions. But they systematically targeted untraceable currency bundles, mostly 50 real notes that hadn't been recorded by serial number.
Making the cash much harder to trace. The final haul weighed 5 tons.
5 tons of cash. Can you imagine the sheer physical labor of moving that weight through a narrow 256-foot tunnel, bag by bag?
It was an exhaustive effort that took the entire weekend. They formed a human chain, passing bags hand to hand back to the landscaping store, then loading it into vehicles.
By the time bank employees arrived on Monday morning, the bank looked completely untouched except for a massive gaping hole in the vault floor.
So the Brazilian Federal Police launch Operation Underground, just stunned by the sophistication. They find the tunnel, but the thieves had been professional enough to burn records and remove evidence.
The investigation quickly identified the mastermind, Luis Fernando Ribeiro, a businessman who had assembled a team of about 25 people. Engineers, diggers, ordinary workers.
The plan was flawless. Get the money, lay low for years, and then quietly launder it.
But here is the central twist, the criminal psychology. The immediate human failure that defeated perfection.
The plan unraveled not because of brilliant forensics, but because the criminals just could not resist immediate, conspicuous consumption.
Greed defeated precision engineering. The sources confirm it was conspicuous spending that betrayed them almost instantly. The police started monitoring suspicious financial transactions and noticed these bizarre patterns within weeks.
One guy bought 17 vehicles in a single month. Another bought a huge farm and stocked it with cattle.
They'd worked in darkness for months, but they just couldn't resist showing off their gains in the daylight.
Arrests began within 2 months. Ribeiro was finally captured in 2006, claiming he was betrayed by his own crew. In total, about 86 people were eventually arrested.
But despite the massive police operation, only a fraction of the money was recovered. Maybe 20 to 40 million reais.
Which leaves roughly 100 million reais, or $40 million USD, still missing today. That money just vanished.
The heist exposed major security vulnerabilities globally. How did a gang dig a massive tunnel for months without anyone noticing? Why no ground vibration sensors in a sensitive financial district?
The global impact was instant. The robbery forced banks worldwide to immediately reassess their security. It led to the installation of seismic sensors and better monitoring of adjacent properties.
And the enduring mystery persists. Where are the missing millions? Was the cash successfully laundered? Did Ribeiro hide secret caches? The legend of the hidden stash persists somewhere in Brazil.
Our final mystery takes us to a quiet tragedy that fundamentally changed an entire nation's way of life. It symbolizes a collective, irreversible loss of innocence.
We are in Adelaide, Australia, a sunny public holiday in 1966.
This case requires a very specific context. This was Australia Day, January 26, 1966. Hot weather, crowded beaches. Jane, who was 9 and very responsible, Arna, 7, and Grant, 4, the Beaumont children, were given some money for lunch.
And they took the 5-minute bus ride alone to Glenelg Beach.
And this detail is so vital. Before this day, children had a level of freedom we can barely imagine today. They were unsupervised, but they were considered safe.
It was common practice for children to travel independently, to interact freely with adults. They were expected home by 2:00 p.m.
When they didn't return by 2, their parents, Nancy and Jim Beaumont, waited nervously, assuming they'd just missed the bus. But as the afternoon wore on, that sense of dread set in.
They finally called the police at 7:30 p.m.
Let's follow their last known movements. They arrived at Glenelg Beach around 10:14 a.m.
By 11:00 a.m., multiple witnesses saw them playing with a specific figure, a tall, blond man in his mid-30s wearing swimming trunks.
What's crucial here is that the children appeared comfortable. They weren't distressed. They were laughing and engaged.
Which suggests they either knew him or he was very, very good at quickly earning their trust.
Then comes the second key piece of evidence around noon. A bakery shopkeeper remembers the children buying pies and paying with a £1 note.
Their mother had given them significantly less money, only enough for the bus fare and lunch.
So where did the extra money come from? The implication is that the mysterious blonde man had given it to them.
And this small act, the gift of money, it would have cemented trust, suggested a connection.
The last confirmed sighting was around 12:30 p.m. They were seen near the changing facilities with the same blonde man, walking away from the main beach area.
And then they vanished, in broad daylight from a crowded public place.
The search that followed became one of the most extensive police operations in Australian history. Thousands of volunteers, reservoirs drained, properties excavated based on every possible lead.
And here is the core, terrifying truth of this mystery. the complete and utter lack of evidence.
Despite the massive search, despite forensic advances over the decades, the sources confirm nothing. No body, no clothing, no concrete physical clue has ever been found.
They vanished into a void so complete it defies logic.
The key suspect is obviously the blonde man. He was seen by multiple independent witnesses, yet he was never positively identified.
That ability to just disappear after such a public interaction suggests a chilling level of planning and confidence.
Later investigations focused on various leads, like Harry Phipps, a local factory owner. His factory was excavated in 2007, but they found nothing.
Police also looked into known sex offenders, like Arthur Stanley Brown and Bevan Spencer von Einem. But the evidence was always circumstantial. The leads always went cold.
The profound legacy of the Beaumont case is the dramatic, instantaneous cultural shift it caused. This single event shattered Australia's innocence.
It absolutely did.
It ended the cultural acceptance of children traveling independently and interacting freely with strangers. Parenting culture was altered overnight.
The immediate collective fear and suspicion gave definitive birth to the term stranger danger in Australia. Before 1966, an Australian childhood meant freedom. After 1966, it meant suspicion, vigilance, boundaries.
And the human cost is immeasurable. The parents, Nancy and Jim Beaumont, they faced an unimaginable psychological hell.
The sources detail how they never moved from their home. They kept the children's rooms ready, accumulated birthday and Christmas presents for years, just hoping for a return that never came.
Their marriage eventually failed under the sheer, agonizing strain of complete, eternal uncertainty.
Both parents died without ever knowing what happened. Nancy in 2019 and Jim just recently in 2023. They lived in a permanent state of tragic limbo.
The mystery is so complete, 3 children vanishing from a crowded beach without a trace, that it altered an entire national psyche.
The Beaumont children symbolized the terrifying, permanent uncertainty of life and the mysteries that refuse to release their grip long after the searchlights have faded.
So we've spent time dissecting 4 very distinct historical mysteries. And while they span continents and circumstances, urban murder, Hollywood death, a massive heist, an Australian disappearance, they share these profoundly powerful common lessons.
They really do. About human behavior and how societies respond to trauma.
If we connect the threads, the Genovese case teaches us the persistent, corrosive danger of myth. It shows how a dramatic, false narrative can become more culturally powerful than the complex facts themselves.
Yeah, shaping our understanding of apathy for generations.
The Monroe case is a perfect illustration of the toxic cost of fame and power. The political context, the secrecy. It guarantees a lack of closure, and it forever breeds cynicism about official findings.
The Bunko Central heist is a testament to the failure of human greed. It shows that the greatest technical perfection can be completely undermined by the simple desire for immediate consumption. Human nature is the biggest security threat.
And the Beaumont children tragedy reminds us of the profound human cost when justice just fails to materialize. It leads to this irreparable loss of collective innocence and changes how an entire society operates day to day.
The shared revelation here is that these cases endure not just because they're technically unsolved, but because they expose fundamental human weaknesses. Our desperation for easy answers, the flaws in our system's media, policing, and the inevitable limits of justice.
We're drawn to them because they reflect our own deepest fears and fascinations with the limits of what we can know.
We tell these stories, we investigate these cold cases, and we debate them not because we expect to solve them 60 years later, but because they connect us to the broader uncertainty of life itself.
So here's our final provocative thought for you to carry away from this deep dive. Which is more corrosive to a functioning, healthy society? The paralyzing uncertainty of an unsolved crime, or the widespread, long-lasting belief in a dramatic, compelling story that is fundamentally untrue?
And still, we search.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
We'll see you next time.